I see my man in the background, Dimitri Lascaris. I'm going to give him a moment to sit down and get prepared because I don't want to just jump over there to him. There we are. Dimitri, my man. How you doing, man? You doing okay today?
I'm doing fine. How you doing, Jamal?
I am doing okay. Better that you are joining me. Dimitri Lascaris. He is lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. He is host of Reason to Resist. You can check him out on YouTube. Dimitri, always appreciate you having you. Always appreciate you joining me. I can't get the words up. So there are a few stories that I wanted to hit with you. I guess we should hit the Flotilla. That has garnered world attention at this point. Hell, they had a news story about it here in Indonesia. There was news stories about it all over the web, even in mainstream press at this point. They were able to get into Gaza port. Well, not Gaza port, I'm sorry. Gaza waters. I think they were like 9 miles off the coast before Israel effectively stopped the rest of the flotilla, despite how close they got. Give me your take on this. I think I've had someone to change your heart over time on this. I see this as a civil rights movement of sorts. Like, I described it in the way that African Americans were crossing a bridge. They see the cops. They know the cops are going to beat the living hell out of them. But they do it because you don't know what experience triggers other experiences that creates an upswell of attention. And I find the flotilla to be something very similar. Blacks sitting in restaurants that have no white, only white signs, knowing they're going to get beaten by the cops. People getting on freedom rides, knowing that they're going to get killed at some point. But they do it because you don't know what experience is the thing that triggers other experiences for the good. Give me your take on this. And I got to be honest, I vacillated on this take. But what are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Interestingly, I just had a debate on my program with Laith Marouf, who is a regular guest on yours, about this very subject. Laith was involved in the Freedom Flotilla, and he and I had a very frank discussion about it, which we published this morning. As I've mentioned on your program before, Jamal, I myself have been a passenger on the Freedom Flotilla twice, and I'm ready to do it again. And at the same time, I respect Laith's point of view, and we can get into that if you want. It's an alternative perspective, which I think deserves to be heard. But but before we get there, I think this is very much in the tradition of Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement that he led. Where you invite by your peaceful resistance the blows of the oppressor in order to arouse the righteous indignation of people around the world who see by virtue of the blows that you are taking on from the oppressor, the evil that needs to be countered and overcome by us all. It's a way to inspire people to action without resorting to violence. And for me, what guides my moral compass on this is the reaction of people within the Gaza Strip itself and in the broader area of occupied Palestine. And in the years that I've been involved with this mission, I have seen nothing but expressions of appreciation and love coming from people within occupied Palestine themselves. I think they understand as well as anybody that there's very little chance that any of these vessels are going to get through in the near term. Let me say that if the flotilla becomes large enough, right, if there are enough vessels trying to get through, eventually some will. Israel's military does not have unlimited capacity to stop peaceful humanitarian missions to the Gaza Strip. But even if none of that ultimately succeeds, what will succeed, and you've highlighted the level of attention that is now being paid to the flotilla. I don't think that since the murder of activists on the Mavi Marmara back in 2010 have we seen this level of attention being paid. And I see a great deal of inspiration being aroused in the hearts and minds of people around the world, and particularly in the West, by the noble gestures of our comrades on the Freedom Flotilla. The debate that I had with Laith is whether this is the best way for the resources of the flotilla to be used. And I say this is a legitimate point of view because one might argue, and I myself took this position in discussions with comrades in the Freedom Flotilla, that maybe some of the resources, perhaps even all of them, should be devoted to doing things like blockading the British military base on the south of Cyprus, Akrotiri. That's a discussion we should have. But at the end of the day, what the people of the flotilla are doing right now as we speak is arousing the righteous indignation of peoples of conscience around the world. It is giving hope and inspiration to the people living under occupation. And I think I have nothing but respect and admiration for the people who are undertaking this dangerous mission.
Yeah, I've spoken to Lath about this myself, and I think he was a bit more skeptical about, like, for example, what does he believe that blocking the, said that one more time, blocking the British, creating a blockade?
Yeah. Right. There's a British military base and on the peninsula of Akrotiri. I've covered this in my program several times. I've been there, documented how they are transporting ginormous quantities of munitions to the genocidal entity throughout this 2 years of genocide. How they're spending, and it's not just me, of course. Somebody who's done tremendous work on this is the people at Declassified UK. They're sending spy flights over Gaza as Israel is performing murderous military operations in the Gaza Strip. And if you were to send, a large contingent of vessels and ring the peninsula and try to approach the shore of the Akrotiri military base, this too would provoke a reaction and draw attention, much more attention than has been paid thus far, to British complicity. And not only British complicity, because the Americans and the French and others, you'll also use that military base to facilitate the genocide, than is currently being paid to Akrotiri. I think that we need to shine a bright light on Akrotiri. And they probably would feel more constrained than the Israelis feel, because of pressure from their own populations and how they would respond to that. It would create a real problem for them if we were to do that. Lath had the idea that, I don't know that this is actually a practicable one, that they try to blockade the Straits of Gibraltar, where, as I understand it, the USS Gerald Ford is currently entering. For what purpose, who knows, along with an aircraft carrier battle group. That may be something that, practically speaking, is not achievable, but certainly there are other areas within the Eastern Mediterranean where the Gaza Freedom Flotilla could engage in similar nonviolent resistance to the complicity of Western governments.
Apparently, from the standpoint, I don't know if you've seen Rome, the UK, many of these European capitals, protests sprung up immediately at the point where the flotilla was halted and the people were arrested. The labor union in, Rome, I believe, Italy's largest labor union announced its general strike of flotilla, handling effectively the fact that the flotilla was stopped. So they're calling for a mass work stoppage. So it is, at the very least, in some locations. I am curious, though, why do you think in Rome, of all places? I mean, like, I don't know if you've seen the protests that were taking place in Rome. They were tearing that place up over the specific thing, especially at Meloni's refusal to acknowledge the shiny object of a two-state solution. But it was the fact that they were doing it, which impressed me more than anything else. The protests that are taking place in Rome or in London, in Italy, are significant. Same thing in London. Why do you think there's certain European capitals where these are taking place versus others, or even in America? I mean, we've had college students at the various universities, but it wasn't like these kind of mass mobilizations that are taking place in other parts of Europe.
Well, I think workers, as a general matter, are much more sensitive to the oppression of the powerful elites than perhaps more affluent members of society. Organized labor has always played a very a critical role in fighting oppression. They identify with the oppressed. But Italy, and my hat is off to the Italians. My God, I'm really truly stand in awe of what is currently happening in Italy. I think there are a couple of reasons for why Italy stands out. Also, I have to, just a shout out to the dock workers here in Greece, in Piraeus. Although we haven't seen that level of mobilization yet, the dock workers have for 2 years been fighting hard to try to stop the use of Greek ports to serve the interests of the Israeli genocidal entity. But in the case of, Southern European states, their governments are playing a particularly uh, uh, important and nefarious role just because of their geographical proximity to Israel in the provisioning of the Israeli military. And secondly, in the case of Italy, I have to look. I can't say that I have any hard evidence of this, but I think this has something to do with Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory. She's currently been invited. I'm reading reports about her being invited on a tour of towns and cities across Italy, where she is being feted by municipal councils and mayors for her extraordinary contribution in the face of enormous opposition and hostility to the Palestinian struggle. And I think that the Italian people have been inspired by her example. I think she deserves a significant amount of credit for what's happening in Italy.
Agreed. I think she should get the Nobel Peace Prize, frankly.
100%.
Nominated for it.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, that woman has been, sanctions, attacks, people ignoring what she had been saying. I mean, she's been pointing out, dude, you're committing a genocide. I mean, this is not like 2 years on. This was 6 months on when it was obvious what she was saying. Genocide is a process. It's not, you wake up one morning and, oh my God, it's a genocide. It's not like a baby being born. It's a thing that takes place over the course of time where these decisions are being made. And she was right all the way through. She was right. And so I'm glad that she's getting the recognition that she deserves for it.
Me too.
Another thing that is happening right now is Copenhagen. I don't know if you've seen this. These people I wish they cared more about their own countries and the fact that their countries are failing. But there's a Copenhagen conference dealing with drones and everything else. Politico called it a talking shop. But of course, the janitor is there. Now, Orban, when describing this, came out and pointed out that these guys are preparing for war. He says it very plainly. He says, Copenhagen Day 2, the situation is serious. Outright pro-war proposals are on the table. They want to hand over EU funds to Ukraine. They're trying to accelerate Ukraine's ascension with all kinds of illegal tricks. They want to finance arms deliveries. All of these proposals clearly show that the Brazilians, I guess the word is, want to go to war. I will stand firmly by Hungarian position, but this summit also proves that the coming months will be about threats of war. We will need the support of the entire political community, of every Hungarian who longs for peace. They are like, it's amazing to me the degree to which they don't seem to accommodate the reality of modern war. Like, Ukraine has lost 1.7 million people. Russia might have lost 200,000 people, maybe 250,000 over the course of 3 years. Europe couldn't field a military of 50,000 if it wanted to tomorrow. And yet you get dude from France saying that France need to be prepared to fight a war tomorrow. French Army Chief Pierre has issued a stark warning. Troops must be ready immediately for high-intensity warfare, including a potential direct military confrontation with Russia. Do you think this is talk, or do you think these people are serious? I mean, certainly France knows that it doesn't have the capability. Europe doesn't have the capability. Ukraine had the largest military in Europe, and they built their military up 3 different times, and it all failed. Do you think this is talk, or do you think there's something more sinister, meaning they're actually serious about this?
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I think they're serious about bankrupting European nations in order to enrich military contractors, especially in the United States. There's no doubt about that, man. I mean, whether they particularly care, these psychopaths, what is done with all of that military equipment that they acquire by bankrupting their nations, I don't know that they particularly care. These people, at the end of the day, are only looking to enrich themselves and to remain in power and to enjoy the perks and privileges of power. And the way they think they can do that is by ingratiating themselves with Washington. And Trump is very clear that he wants more money, huge amounts of money, to flow from the coffers of European governments into the coffers of American military contractors, and they're complying with the order. So that at a bare minimum is happening. Whether they actually harbor some delusion that we could survive a war with Russia, hard to say, but I wouldn't put it past them. They might actually intend to use that military equipment for purposes of waging a war in Russia. I think they're having a lot of difficulty, Jamal, accepting the fact that the era of European hegemony is over. You know, Europe was always living beyond its means, always during these past several hundred years. And the way it did that was by looting and pillaging with brutal savagery the global South. And the global South ain't putting up with it anymore. And the global South now has the ability to resist that kind of looting and pillaging. And they just can't handle the fact that they're no longer the masters of the universe.
Yeah.
And so they're flailing about and doing things that could potentially get us all killed. So I can't rule out the possibility. I don't think any of us should rule out the possibility that they might actually use these armaments that they're acquiring at immense public cost to wage a war on Russia. But let's have no doubt about where that will end. That will end in the destruction of humanity. You know, interestingly, I had a lunch yesterday with some friends, one of whose daughters is a 22-year-old studying at a university here in Greece, who is fairly politically engaged. And I asked her, just out of curiosity, I said, the Europeans are saying that Russia intends to attack, and she's not a friend of Russia. She doesn't have a positive opinion of the Russian government. And they're saying that the Russia intends to attack the European Union state, NATO. Do you believe it? And no. She said, I don't really believe it. She said, maybe they would go after some Eastern European state that doesn't have a connection to NATO, that isn't part of NATO. She was prepared to entertain that possibility, but she didn't think it was a serious proposition that Russia would attack NATO. In fact, the fact of the matter is, if Russia were going to attack NATO, it would have done it by now, because NATO has given it plenty of reason during the past, 3.5 years of war with Ukraine to attack NATO. And yet Russia has refrained. Not a single attack has actually occurred on a NATO country, despite the fact that we have funneled massive amounts of munitions into Ukraine. We have provided intelligence to the Ukrainian military to attack targets within Russia. We have given them the means to do that, and still Russia has refrained. So there's really no evidence to suggest that they will attack us. This is all just a pretext to justify the bankrupting of European countries to enrich military contractors.
I often wonder, what do Europeans think? Because there's no way for me to know, right? Like, if you're just sitting in a cafe and you just, hey, and something comes on, like Bronderland comes on TV. It's like, you believe her? I don't have an answer for that. I know you spoke to your friend. Have you spoken to any other Europeans who?
Lots. I've had lots of conversations like that, although they tend to be with people who are of the of our vintage. There's a diversity of opinion. There certainly isn't a unanimity of views about this in Europe, but I do think that there's a large degree of skepticism about this narrative, and the skepticism is growing here in Greece. There was a general strike yesterday because the Greek government is trying to introduce a 13-hour workday. I repeat, 13-hour workday.
Wait, okay, so I did hit it right. 13 hours.
Correct. 13 hours. They want to basically reduce the population of Greece to serfdom. That's what's going on. So there was a general strike. I think people here in Europe are becoming increasingly incensed at what is being done to their quality of life, and more their attention is turning to that rather than to these fabricated threats. And the more and more they make the connection between the impoverishment of their communities and the diminution in their quality of life on the one hand, and the enrichment of military contractors, because there's a strong connection between the two. They're shoveling money away from, socially beneficial programs to armaments. The more and more this rage is going to grow. And I think that's where we're heading. We're heading for a massive social upheaval in Europe. Where that will end up is the question. Will we end up in a state of fascism, or will we end up in a state of progressive revolution? And I think that, all bets are off as to which way we're going to go.
Yeah, I feel the same way with the U.S. I mean, did you see that speech that Donald Trump and Hegseth gave yesterday? That's a humiliating speech. I mean, part of it I agree with. Like, look, some people may disagree with me on this, but militaries are supposed to be lethal. And so the idea of saying, okay, well, we have men who are going to deal with these perilous missions, whatever. And there's certain qualifications for it because we want those men to survive, or at the very least have the highest chance of survivability in those missions. And then someone says, well, yeah, but I know she's only 5'5" and 100 pounds, but give her a chance. It's like, no, no, we're not giving her a chance. No, I'm sorry. No, it's nothing about her being a good person. She may be the nice person on the planet, but the purpose is different. Like the rationale for it is different. It's not about the smoke stuff. It's a military. It's supposed to be lethal, right? But the other stuff was insane. Like Donald Trump effectively made the argument that we're going to be sending U.S. military to democratic cities. And you're like, okay, well, so you're sending military to cities of your opposition. What the hell is that? And what are you using for that rationale? Just because. You would say Antifa. Antifa is not a real organization, but it doesn't matter if it's a real organization. You just say it and then you do it. And he is telling these people, like, meaning this was a lunatic, harebrained speech by Hegseth and by Donald Trump. I think you're right. Because it seems like it's accelerating, even in the United States on this. I guess the scary part is that you point out also, which way does it go? I don't have an answer for that. I don't have an answer for that at all. You got to explain the 13-hour workday to me. What is the rationale for forcing people to work 13 hours?
Well, I think employers like it because they squeeze more out of their workers for less money. They don't have to hire as many workers. They can hire few of them, and they have more leverage over workers. And the more latitude you give employers to exploit workers, the more that workers will become impoverished, and that's exactly what's happening here. So this is going to result in people being much more exhausted by the day-to-day requirements of their employment, and employers, fewer people getting employed. Because if you can force a worker to work 13 hours, you don't, as opposed to having being limited to 7 hours, 13 hours versus 7 hours, then you hire fewer people. So you have higher rates of unemployment in the society as a result of that. And when there's a larger proportion of the population is unemployed, you're able to extract labor from people for less money, because so you have when you have a very high employment rate, a lot of people out there can't get a job. They're willing to work for less wages. There's a lot more people out there willing to work for lower wages. So all of this results in downward pressure on wages, and that ultimately is what's going on here. It's all about enabling employers to exploit workers to a greater and greater degree. Back in 2010, Jamal, Greece was basically designated by the EU and by the IMF as a radical experiment in neoliberalism.
Yes.
And it's just been getting worse and worse and worse ever since. In 2015, for me, this should have been the decisive moment in the mind of anybody who was questioning whether or not EU membership was a good thing. In 2015, when the troika of Greece's creditors was trying to impose upon Greece a vicious austerity program, another one,
Yep.
Alexis Tsipras, who was the prime minister at the time, held a referendum, and 63% of Greeks said no to the austerity regime. Within 24 hours, he just flushed the referendum down the toilet. The Greek finance minister, Yanis Varoufakis, resigned in protest, and he imposed on the people of Greece an even more vicious austerity program that they had rejected in the referendum. And it's been downhill ever since. And because they're succeeding here, they're going to take this. They've already started to do this. They're doing this in France. This is why France is in an uproar. They're trying to transfer from this experiment that I live in here in Greece half the year to the larger economies of Europe. So we're heading for a massive social upheaval in Europe, and it could turn out in any number of ways, some of which are really, really ugly.
I guess that's where they have digital ID coming into play. I mean, they're pushing it through in London, but of course, it's going to also end up in Europe. Yeah, that's terrifying. I mean, but Europe needs something else. I mean, they're stagnant technologically, politically at this point. They seem to be in a straitjacket. They're lagging behind the other major entities, meaning I'm saying that uproar may be necessary in order to get Europe into a different space and to have its own foreign policy as opposed to be completely dependent upon the United States. But as you point out, which side does that go? And I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer. It's been a few days, but I do want to get your take on the Netanyahu and Donald Trump 20-point ultimatum, as I'm calling it, because it's damn sure not a plan for peace. I haven't seen there was a Hamas official that pointed out that Hamas was going to reject the deal, but I haven't seen the official rejection come through yet. Have you seen an official rejection?
The last time I checked was this morning, early this morning. I had not seen any. I had seen a rejection, a really derisive rejection from the Popular Resistance Committees. One of the factions fighting. It's not just Hamas. They never tell us this. There are numerous resistance groups operating in the Gaza Strip. So they rejected it out of hand. Islamic Jihad rejected it out of hand. Certainly, there were some negative comments coming out of Hamas, although it wasn't a decisive rejection before today. But I just can't imagine, Jamal, that this will be accepted. And let me tell you, if by some miracle the leadership of Hamas accedes to this ultimatum, you're entirely correct to call it an ultimatum. That's exactly what it is. I don't think they're going to be able to implement it anyways, because I don't think that the actual fighters on the ground are going to comply. They will just rise up in some other form. Maybe they'll simply overthrow the leadership of Hamas and replace them with people. I think they take their inspiration. My sense is that they take their inspiration from people like Sinwar, who died fighting against the occupation. And if anybody in a leadership position says to them, we're going to lay down our arms and turn over the POWs before the Israelis perform any of their, extremely inadequate commitments under this so-called peace plan, we want new leaders. You're out. We're finished with you. And if we can't get rid of you, we're going to start a new resistance organization. But there's no goddamn way in hell we're giving up our weapons or those POWs before we have guarantees that this genocide will come to an end and that the occupation will be over. So I don't think that Hamas, the leadership, could accede to this plan, even if it wanted to.
It's such a scam, right? It's like this sick scam that these guys are trying to pull over. And I get the rationale for it. I mean, and then to show how dodgy this is, every vassal Arab Muslim kingdom agreed to it. Every European state agreed to it. The American Pope agreed to it. And all of it was within one day. Yeah, we like this. We don't even, meaning we probably haven't even read the plan yet. But yeah, we agree to it. Give me your take on why. I'm not going to give my take. Give me your take on why.
Because they look. Last time I was on your show, I think I mentioned that the Saudi royal family is purported to have a net worth of $1.4 trillion. Okay, these are the highest paid house slaves on God's green earth. Okay, all they care about is their money. That's it. They don't care about anything else. They don't care about their own people, let alone Palestinians. So the masters, the ones who provide them the protection for their racket, the racket that has made them fabulously wealthy, said, bless this ultimatum and call it a peace plan. And they said, yes, sir. whatever I have to do to remain fabulously wealthy, I'll do it. All we need to do is look at this ridiculous exchange that Netanyahu and Trump had with the Prime Minister of Qatar over the murder, the attempted murder of the Hamas negotiating team in Doha, and the murder of a Qatari security official. Netanyahu, after the Prime Minister thundered that this was state terrorism, this is barbarism, we are going to implement fiery retaliation for this crime. All that Netanyahu had to do was say, hey, we didn't mean to kill your person, and we regret that a Qatari citizen died. They kissed, they made up, and it's as though nothing happened. That tells you all you need to know about these autocrats and what their true agenda is.
It's something else you said too, though, a pressure valve. Like part of the plan at the very end is like, in 100 years, we may get a two-state solution for Palestine. Okay. And Netanyahu immediately comes out in Hebrew before he even leaves DC. Under no circumstances am I accepting a Palestinian state. And Trump agrees with me on that. Okay, but dude, you even have it in the deal. Like how, like it's amazing to me where it's like, we don't even care enough to pretend all that much. And it's a release valve for the various European cities. I mean, for the very European countries. So the leadership of Europe, who for the most part is okay with this genocide, or at the very least agnostic about it, don't care. They're like, Jesus, our populations are pissing us off. We need to find some way to shut these people up. Oh, I know. Hey, we have a pathway to a two-state. See, right there. It's that. Donald Trump has come up with one. And I support that thing. So you can all chill out now. The question is, do you think that's going to work? Are people that dumb to look at this plan, one by a war criminal, the other one by the person who's funding that war criminal, even with the idea of trying to create a slave colony with Tony Blair, another war criminal, is supposed to be viceroy over? Like, this is nonsense on its face. Is the public going to accept this?
Nah, I don't believe it. A poll would just, they might have accepted it a couple of years ago. Sure, they might have been, we're beyond that now. The poll was just published by the New York Times that was done with Siena University, which found for the first time since the polling on these issues began in 1998, that more Americans sympathize with Palestinians than Israelis, and 51% of Americans are opposed to providing military or economic aid to the genocidal entity. It's just going to get worse from here. They can't stop it from getting worse because people see what is happening to the Palestinians. They're horrified by it. The information one way or another will keep getting out, and more people are going to turn against Israel. And this whole thing, there are two other things going on in the United States which are really exacerbating the public relations problem for Israel. The one is the Epstein scandal, and the other is Charlie Kirk, right? Whoever killed Charlie Kirk, the fact of the matter is, and it's been well established by people like Max Blumenthal, Candace Owens, and others, they've documented this, Tucker Carlson. Charlie Kirk was raising very uncomfortable questions about Israel, and Israel's donors and the government itself were getting very concerned about this in the weeks leading up to his death. So this naturally, whatever actually happened, I don't claim to know. I certainly don't believe the FBI narrative, but whatever actually happened, naturally this is creating huge amounts of suspicion about Israel. And already the connections, that Epstein had with the Mossad and Ehud Barak and all of that was a huge headache. So when you add all of this up, there is, I think Israel is in an unarrestable downfall in public opinion in the West, and particularly the United States, where it matters the most because of the support the U.S. gives to Israel. And these theatrics aren't going to stop that. The only thing that's going to stop it is an end to the genocide.
Yeah, but it doesn't seem like Netanyahu.
And by the way, I just want to add, please. Even then, Israel's public reputation will not be rehabilitated. At that stage, they can simply, I guess, stop the downfall. But I don't think Israel is ever going to recover from this and regain the standing that it had with the American people, before this genocide began. That's gone. That era is over.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I think it was the ADL that made the point of saying, we need to be able to maintain Israel's reputation. It's like, dude, that's done. That's done. Like, that reputation is beat into the ground. I don't know how you rehabilitate that. You've done this on a world stage. I don't know how you extricate yourself from that. But it does seem like, and let me ask it this way, do you think that many of these countries came to Trump and said, look, this looks bad. We are getting all sorts of heat. We need a way out of this. And this was the plan they came up with. That was the way out. This kind of, tailored mechanism to try to make it look as if, well, Israel is working with the U.S. in order to try to come up with a deal. And if Hamas rejects this, then, obviously Hamas is the issue. I mean, it's I give them credit, it's sophisticated, but it seems a bit shallow. I don't know. I think you're right, though. I don't think the public and the people who are out there protesting are going to somehow just stop protesting over a plan when they have a memory longer than a chipmunk, you know? So
yeah,
we will see, though. Especially, I mean, the fact that Rome is out there protesting now, despite the fact that this plan exists, or that London is protesting outside the fact that the plan exists, gets across that that energy may not stop. And I hope it doesn't. I guess the catch becomes, is there a point where it matters in tangible sense of the word? Like beyond just the pressure, is there a point where it's, because Israel is making a calculation in its mind, we can do whatever we want, providing we have the help of a superpower. Does that calculation work? I mean, up to this point, I guess it has. But does it maintain itself? Does it continue to work?
That's up to the American people, my friend. That is up to the American people. And I call upon our brothers and sisters in the United States to do the right thing and put an end to this slaughter. This depends more on you than anybody.
Yeah. If that's true, we're all screwed.
I have more confidence in the American people than you do.
I don't.
But then again, I don't live in the United States. So.
I live here. I don't.
Yeah.
Because as I made the point to somebody before, it's different. It's not like, listen, it's not like Vietnam, right? Where you have troops coming back in body bags. You have American families losing people. You're seeing images on the TV screen, and you're seeing like Walter Cronkite, making the point of saying this war is pointless, this war is a scam, et cetera, et cetera. It's not even like Iraq, where you have Bush trying to cover up the fact that there are coffins with flags draped over them, and you get 1 million people on the streets being angry. This is different. This is more esoteric. I mean, you can see the pictures on Twitter, but asking Americans to get involved when they don't see Americans getting killed is a tough sell. You have more confidence.
Look, I agree with that, but I think, I go back to what I said about Epstein and about Charlie Kirk and about this whole notion that America first. These are also important factors. And the people in the United States, I think, based on what I see, are drawing a connection between their own suffering and U.S. foreign policy in the region, and particularly the support for Israel. Okay, yeah. They see this guy Epstein was an American who was sexually abusing and exploiting for economic gain or other purposes young American girls. And they see huge amounts of money going out when they themselves are feeling increasing economic pressure in their day-to-day lives. And then they see somebody, perhaps if you're a MAGA person, who, admired Charlie Kirk, an American, a good white boy from the United States, and you're wondering, was this person actually killed by Israel? Did Israel kill this guy? So they're starting. It's not the same thing, I acknowledge, as body bags of American young men coming home. That is really visceral and can cause immediate outrage. But I think a lot of people in the United States are starting to make the connection between U.S. foreign policy in West Asia and their own suffering.
I see.
So that's a longer process. It takes more time, unfortunately, but that is an important factor, I think.
You heard the Tucker Carlson thing, right? Where Tucker Carlson made the point of saying there's some guy eating hummus, and he said, "Let's get this guy out of here." And people were like, "Whoa!" And then he just blame Israel for the murder of Charlie Kirk. And of course, there's a lot of anomalies. Like the moment that Charlie Kirk died, Netanyahu, in a split second, his body is not even cold. Netanyahu was putting out tweets of like, the Muslims killed Charlie Kirk. It's like, who the hell, dude, why are you in this? Right? And he's sending out tweet after tweet after tweet talking about Charlie Kirk. And it looks dicey. I mean, offering Charlie Kirk like $150 million in order to back genocide more profusely. And Charlie Kirk told him no. Okay, again, that looks very dicey. And then what happens if Talking Point USA actually becomes a Tucker Carlson or a Candace Owens-ish type person, where he says, look, Netanyahu is an issue, even though I support Israel. Okay, even that split is problematic. I don't know. It's
I'll just add this anecdote. I talked about this young Greek student I spoke with yesterday over lunch. She asked me in that conversation, just out of the blue, I wasn't even raising this up. She goes, "Do you think Israel killed Charlie Kirk?"
Did she?
I thought a Greek student here in Greece is asking me that question. That's of course this is tiny sample of the information that we all need to look at, and it's anecdotal, but wow, that that somebody, a student here in the south of Greece, studying European politics, is asking me whether Israel killed Charlie Kirk. That suggests to me there's a lot of suspicion out there in the West about what actually happened here, and these types of things ultimately are going to come with a serious cost to Israel.
Yeah, she's 10,000 miles away, and she's thinking about this. Wow.
Yeah.
Dimitri, I guess this will be the last question on this. What is it like in southern Greece now? Like, are you still seeing a huge number of Israelis that have polluted their area, have taken up land and all of this other stuff, or has it chilled out somewhat now that?
Well, it's tourist season. Yeah, tourist season's definitely over, and so there's not nearly as many tourists. But now that you mention it, Jamal, I was having lunch with my wife at our favorite seaside tavern here in Kalamata the other day, and there was a young couple, lying on some beach chairs, and they had tattoos, which suggested to me that they might be Israelis. So I just walked by and noticed that they were reading a book in Hebrew. And at that point, I turned on a very well-known Arab resistance song on my iPhone and played it as loud as I could. It's just...
Do you think? I know you've seen. I'm sorry. I know you've seen the aircraft, the cargo planes, and everything else that are going to Qatar. And I guess there are two parts to this. One, apparently, the United States, in order to shut Qatar up, signed some kind of deal with Qatar that the U.S. will come to its military aid if ever it's attacked, kind of like Article 5. I need to verify that, but I'll call it a rumor right now before I verify it. And two, all of these military planes, cargo planes, and tankers showing up at Al Udeid's airbase in Qatar. Of course, the people who I've talked to strongly believe, many of which are military people, that the U.S. is gearing up to assist Israel in another attack on Iran. Do you buy that, or not so much? And this will be the last question.
Sure. I think it's inevitable that there will be an attack. The precise timing of it, I think, is going to depend in part on their calculus as to their ability to pull it off logistically. Yeah. The weapon stocks of the United States and Israel are obviously quite depleted. They also, I think, although they won't admit it publicly, grasp that they are much more vulnerable to Iranian missiles than they perhaps had believed. So they must be, struggling to find ways to enhance their level of protection. So that may cause a delay, for all of that to play out and for them to get to a position where they think they're ready. But will they do it? Absolutely. Why? They're eliminated. They're hell-bent on eliminating any and all resistance to Washington's hegemony in the region. And they understand perfectly well that unless they effect a regime change in Iran, they will never have hegemony over West Asia. They can have a very dominant position, particularly in certain Arab countries, but there's always going to be resistance as long as this particular government is in power in Iran. So they're going to try by any and all means possible to eliminate it. And my guess is that'll begin before the end of the year, but it might take longer. But have no doubt it's coming.
Wow. I guess those Israelis are going to be coming back to Greece pretty soon.
Well, they may not get as good a welcome the next time. We'll have to see about that.
Dimitri, man, I always appreciate these conversations. You are a fantastic guest, and I really appreciate you joining me, man. You enjoy the rest of your time. Thank you for this.
You too, Jamal. Always love talking to you, man.
Thank you for this. Dimitri Lascaris. He is a lawyer, journalist, activist from Montreal, Quebec. He is host of Reason to Resist. Definitely check him out on his YouTube channel. You be safe, man. Enjoy your day.
You too. Take care.
All right. Dimitri is fantastic. Dimitri is